So please welcome James Robbins to the show. Welcome, James.
Ashley, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome, all the way from Denver, Colorado. And I've been studying and going down your rabbit hole and learning about your magical life and hearing and listening about your new book called The Call to Climb. And I love metaphors and I love to, if I was going to be in a bookstore, I was thinking if I walked by that book, what would draw me to that? I love the bookstores. I mean, we're the same age. So growing up, I was always at the bookstore because I've always been a seeker and, always would come in and see what book would pull my, get my attention or fall off the shelf, right? Like I know I'm supposed to read that book. But when started reading about what the book was about and understanding it's not, it's I mean, it's not a true story, but you have all these amazing learnings along the way, kind of thing about climbing the mountain. It gave me this feeling of like if I saw that book at Barnes and Noble, it would make me want to, because I'm a mom, this is where I went and where I'm at parenting with my girls. I want them to understand that it is about the climb. And it isn't there that song, Miley Cyrus?
Yeah.
Right? That's what just came to my mind. And one of my daughters sang that as a solo one time, and everyone just loved it. And I remember thinking, it is those words in that song and your book, and understanding the climb and knowing that you're going to go up and then you're going to go down. And it's all the down part that's going to make you even be more excited because you're going to understand that those little peaks and valleys were all meant for you. Those were all the little breadcrumbs you had to pick to get to that. And it never ends. And it's so exciting. So, okay, James, that's just my like whatever came to me thinking about the call to the climb. But we go back because I know you used to be a minister. You went to college, but then left and didn't finish college, which I love that story because I'm all about following whatever leads like you do. I mean, that's really part of what I see as, now in our mid 50s. And when you started writing this book, it wasn't long ago. So when I look back at your life at college, you were going to like, I'm going to start the climb. I don't need to be at this place that doesn't even resonate with me. So take me back. You can explain your family or whatever, but where you started uncovering your magic.
For sure. I grew up on a small cattle ranch in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And so I was this redheaded, shy kid with all these freckles. I was the only redheaded kid in my town. And I remember all the old ladies used to see my hair and they would be like, "Oh, you have such amazing hair. The girls must really love your hair." I was like, "Nope, nope, they don't." Right? Like I just grew up this shy, introverted kid. But you come out of school and you get into college, you don't know what you're doing. And it was over time. Like originally, I wanted to become a film director. That was my goal in life. I just wanted to go
Hmm.
and basically tell stories through film. But yeah, life took a turn I didn't expect, and I started working for this church, and then I went into ministry. I was like, whoa, how did I get here? But I really enjoyed the work because I was just helping people, and I love that. And this is one of those things, Ashley, like I know you've talked about this before, but this idea that your life leaves these breadcrumbs. Like there's these things that bring you alive. It might not even be a certain career, but it might be things within that career that you do that you're like, I really love this part. And all of that is sending a message to you, right? Of like why you're here, what you're destined to be. So, anyways, I was doing that for a long time, but over a number of years, I started to get really unhappy in ministry. And this is actually where the book had its beginnings, like 15 years ago, is I was in ministry, I was not happy. And for anyone who's ever served in that way, or maybe in a not-for-profit, a very like a highly purpose-driven company or organization, well, when you start to feel unhappy, it's almost like you feel bad about that. Because people would tell you, like, hey, you've got like the best job, and I wish I had your job. And you'd be like, yeah, yeah, I got the best job. But driving home, you'd be like, well, why am I so depressed? And especially when it's a faith-based career, then you feel
Right.
guilty, like I can't quit. Like I can't quit. I can't quit on, God. That would look bad. Like so all this pressure. But anyways, it was in this time that I ended up just having this burnout. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. And it was then I stumbled across the work by Dr. James Hollis. He's this Jungian psychoanalyst, and he's written a ton of books, but one of his books was called Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life. And in that, he talked about how at some point, like in your 20s, you kind of launch into the life you've been programmed to live, right? That mom and dad want you to live. But at some point, the soul starts to speak up and says, hey, there's something more for us. There's something different for us. And begins to tug on us. And so he talks about this and says that the soul summons all of us to an appointment, but most of us don't show up to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my case. It was like all these nudges from the soul, like to get my attention that I should be doing something else. And I didn't pay attention either. I was just like, no, I just got to keep going. Because that's what happens to us. We get into this lane and we think, well, I can't change now. And so
Right.
let me just keep going. But it was during that time that when I read that, I thought, wouldn't that be interesting if there was a story about someone who was avoiding a conversation with the soul, but then they were drawn into an environment where they couldn't escape the conversation. And so that's how the call to climb, that was the genesis of it, where the main character stumbles into this remote village in Bolivia, only to find out that this village has been expecting them because they've been called to climb so that they might finally have a conversation with their soul so that they can actually find their true path.
But explain too, before that, you were being called to climb literally to these mountains and you kept saying no. And that too is another for me when I think of things that have come into my life where I've said no, or I've maybe given Richard's like, you should go do that, like Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat. And he says no, right? Or that's not a value to him at that time, right? But when you keep saying no, but they keep bringing, it keeps reappearing in your life, and you understand finally, okay, I'm going to have to, will you explain that? Because I think there's some magic to that for people to understand, like, even when you use the metaphor, the mountain, there's more mountain in you before you even start the book.
For sure. So it was during that same time when I was like unhappy and really struggling with like, what am I supposed to be doing? I ran across this guy named Wally Berg, and he's been up Everest like 4 times. He's a really well-known American climber. And I just went to his house one time. I can't even remember how all this happened. Maybe I got with him on Facebook or something. And he ran a guiding company where they were going on expeditions all over the world. And so I'd go to his house and he's showing me National Geographic and he's opening it up. He's like, oh yeah, I took this photo when I was coming down off of Everest, by myself. And I'm just like in mountaineering like heaven in this moment. There's this giant that's right there with me. But then he would say, hey, we're gonna go climb Mount Elbrus in Russia in 6 months. Why don't you come? And I was like, oh, I'd love to do that. It was like this dream thing. I'd love to do that, Wally, but I just can't. Like with what, kids are young and I can't afford that. But I would just go back out there maybe 3 months later, visit him again. He's like, hey, we're going to Kilimanjaro in Africa. And we might see a safari after. Why don't you come? I was like, oh, I'd love to, Wally, but I can't do that. And one day I go out there and he says, we're going to Bolivia. We're going to climb the highest peak in the country called Mount Sahama. And it's this amazing culture. He said, you should come. And I'm like, oh, I love to, Wally, but I can't. And I was driving back to my house. It was like an hour drive. And then I just thought, is this going to be my life? Like Wally inviting me on great adventures and me turning them down. And I'm like, at some point, like, what's going to give you the green light, James? Like, your parents aren't going to come in and say, hey, by the way, go on this trip. And so, obviously I had a family, so I had to clear it with them. But I just called him up. I was still driving home. I just called him up. I'm like, how much do you need for a deposit? And he's like, I can't remember what it was, not much. And I'm like, all right, here's my credit card. And I just gave him my credit card. And it was like that anxiety, like, oh, what have I just done? But then that kicked off this great adventure that so much of what I write in the book comes from my own expedition in Bolivia, just being there. But life's like that. Like you said, it will put these things in front of you again and again, and we will find excuses why we can't do that, right? Why we can't travel, why we can't change our job, why we can't start a side hustle. why we can't start a new relationship or why we can't leave a one that we're in. So we have all these things that just bind us into this lane. And again, that's not bad, but at the same time, what more is waiting for you? And that's where, I come back to the principles in the book that hey, your soul knows why you're here, right? Your soul knows what you're meant to do. And we want to listen to that.
Right. So I want to get into that because there's five parts of that book that I love. But before we get there, when do you end the ministry? And I kind of want to know, like, because it's such a spiritual evolution for me to learn about your life, but to understand you were a minister, and then where does that, like, where does the why in the road come?
So during that time when I was like, I got to do something else, and maybe I can go to law school or something. Like it had all these things, but again, there was all this pressure of like, you can't leave. I even had a boss tell me, you can't quit. Like you can't. It was like being in a gang, right? Like you can't leave the gang. It's like you can't leave. Um, but it was not long after that time I spoke about that I finally just was like, I'm out. Like I'm stopping. And so I got out of ministry for 2 years. And then that was back in 2008 when the global financial crisis. And I just happened to go into like my leadership development company, which everything just crashed to zero. So 2 years later, I'm like, I need a job. Like I am not making enough money and I don't want to go back to ministry. But this position opened up in Florida and we thought, oh, why not? So all of a sudden we went down to Florida, which became just the next chapter in the story. But I think the newness of it gave me that excitement because I'm very entrepreneurial. I like to fix things. I like to get things from if they weren't healthy to get it to a healthy place. But then the same pattern showed up in Florida and I'm like, I'm not happy. What am I doing here? And funny enough, I had this chance to go to South America with John Maxwell. It was just kind of this crazy sort of events that happened because I'd always looked up to him. I just had never known him. But then, my book came out and they invited me to come with him down to South America and teach. So it was just him and I teaching for the day. It was awesome. But I asked him, we had lunch together and I said, hey, how did you know when it was time to leave ministry? And he just said, one day I got on a plane, I was flying back to San Diego where his ministry was. And he said, I had this feeling like, I don't want to go back to it. And that's when he knew it was time to leave. And I was like, oh, I've had that moment like 10 years ago. Like, and but I didn't have the courage to
Right.
really take ownership of my life and make those decisions because I was so worried about what everyone else would think. So that's my ministry was like up, down, before I finally was like, okay, enough's enough.
So when I think of a minister, it's very, religious, very uh, structured. But when I now know this, I don't know, James 2.0 or 3.0 or 10.0, whatever you want to call it, I don't see that structure. I see more of the flow and the spiritual and the, seeing the soul. And can you explain that transition? Or
Yeah,
is there one?
well, I think yes and no, meaning this happens to a lot of us, even in like a leadership position. Like we get into some position, leadership, ministry, whatever it might be, and we have this image of what we're supposed to be. And so we all of a sudden conform ourselves, like, oh, I got to be this, I got to be serious, and I got to, but what we're just doing is we're just putting on these masks and we're showing up. And I get you got to show up in a professional way, of course. But when we're showing up because we think I got to be this, I got to be that, then you can't live like that for a long time, or you just get disconnected from your soul. And it sounds so strange. What would be the word? It sounds so like to be in ministry and feel like you're actually disconnecting from your soul, an oxymoron almost, right? It would seem like, no, that's where you would go work. So you'd be connected with your soul. But I think for me, ministry was a disconnect. And again, so part of back to was this a transformation? I think it was more of a return to like who I really am, who James really is. the kid who grew up on the cattle ranch who spent his days exploring and having adventures and looking around and yet also liked to help people. And one of the things I discovered was that, I'm very purpose driven, I'm sure as you are as well with the work that you do. And for a long time, I kept thinking, well, if I'm not happy here, what should I be doing? Like, what's my purpose in life? And people get caught up into this, like, well, what's my purpose? And we think so much of like, what am I supposed to do? But what I've learned is that our purpose isn't really, in a sense, to do something as much as it is to become something. You can think of it a little bit like the soul is like an acorn. It's like an oak seed, and within it is this potential to become an oak tree. That's the expression of it, and it doesn't care what anyone thinks, but it's just going to become an oak tree. Now, as an oak tree, it's going to do a lot of things, right? Provide shade, create a home for animals, keep the ground from eroding. But that's not really the goal to do, it's to be. And once I began to realize that I'm here to bring the most authentic version of me to the planet. That's the gift to myself, and that's my gift to the world. Now, how I express that, I could express that through 1,000 different jobs. There's not like this one. It's a little bit like when people have this view like there's one soulmate out there for you, like there's just one person. Well, it puts so much pressure on finding that one person. Or you could go on all
Right.
these dates and think, well, is that the one person? Well, there's probably a lot of potential people that could be amazing partners for everyone. It's so that was a huge shift for me to get away from what should I be doing to who am I called here? Who am I called to be? And how can I express these gifts that I feel like, God has given in a way that is fun for me and fun for them.
How do you, when you are coaching or teaching, you're a speaker, you have a company that coaches companies. How do you get someone to understand, to listen to their soul and to get their programming and the blinders off of their, how they've been raised and society? And I look back, like we were talking before, like, gosh, just being raised in the 80s, like 70s and 80s, right? Like what a life we got to have. And our kids have no clue of that freedom and the no technology, but we still were programmed, but it was a different way. And now our children, in this time of our life, in this generation, they're being programmed in ways that I mean, we're probably not aware of on technology and social media. So when you're helping these people of this in this time of our life in 2025, and how do you get them to take those blinders and to really go deep into seeing their soul, and that when they know that their soul's speaking, like I know when I'm very connected to my intuition and I'm like, okay, I gotcha. Like there's my soul speaking. I know that feeling. And I try to teach my girls that feeling. Like when you're getting called to do something, what does it feel like in your body? That's your soul speaking to you. But for the most part, a lot of people live with those blinders on and the programming and just move from A to B and then look at, oh, I'm just, how long till I retire and die? Like, so tell me how you do that. How do you do that?
Yeah, you bring up such a great point. And especially when I'm working in the corporate environment, a lot of people are just going through the motions, just like hamster wheel, like, hey, when will I retire? 5 more years. They're thinking, do I have enough? And that's just how they live. Entrepreneurs, I find, are a little bit more dialed into that. But all of us understand the concept of an inner voice, whether we call it soul, psyche, intuition. Um, in some ways, it doesn't matter what we call it, but it is getting people to wake up that there is value there, and that to start to pause enough and create some separation from just the rat race of life to tune in, because it's so easy to just distract yourself and jump back in sort of this to the circus. And I did that right for decades. Like I have all these, tuggings on my heart. Like, why am I not happy? Why do I want to do something else? But okay, here comes Sunday. Let's get ready. And then off we go. And you just do that for 50 weeks a year and then take a vacation here and another one there. So part of it is, yes, getting them to first realize, wait a minute, that's true. I've had that voice or that feeling or that nudge. But I think what happens is a lot of people, they don't listen to it, or they don't trust themselves with it. Like they don't trust it. In other words, um, well, I will say this. This is one of the reasons why you have to know yourself really well, because sometimes your intuition is not your intuition. It's just your ego, wanting you to get out of a situation. But when
Hmm.
you start to understand your fears and some of the ways you've been programmed even growing up, you can at least catch that. Like, oh, is this my intuition, or is this just some fear coming up because I might be worried about this? Well, that's helpful to be able to have that self conversation and weed your way through that.
Right. So how do you tell me uh, how do you tell people, how do you discern the voice that's coming through or the ego voice? How do you teach that?
That's definitely nuance. I wish I just had a really concise answer for you, but let me stumble through it best I can. I think when I've worked with people, and including my own life, right? So usually what happens is when we feel something, then pretty soon there's like these two paths before us, right? Like I feel like there's this path and then there's this path I'm on. And how do I know that I should go to the other path? Well, when people can get clear and just be able to call out like whatever the fear is and sort of weed through that. And once they can sort of walk through, is this just a fear of mine? And I'm worried that if I go this way, um, and once they realize like, okay, that's just fear, then great, I can come back to what I would call as my spiritual compass. So let me take a step back. One of the things I do when I'm working with people is that we talk about creating their spiritual compass, which is kind of like values, but a little bit more so. It's this idea of what's going to define success for you in what areas of life as well, right? So maybe there's maybe one of your areas is faith, and maybe one is friendships, one is as a parent, maybe something's about health, but it's these areas. One's about soul or vocation. And what I get people to do is to ask these questions like, well, let's say let's say parenting, because you and I are in a similar situation, right? Parenting of adult children. Well, that's my situation. So what do I believe about parenting adult children? And why do I believe that? Like, not what do my parents believe? What is this preacher telling me? Like, what do I actually believe about parenting adult children? And what do I want this to actually look like? And then out of that, I can go, all right, then what's my commitment? And so when you can look at these major areas like that in your life, right? So again, that's one for me. One is about health. One is about being a great friend. One is about just my soul, like honoring my path. All right, then I have a commitment to each one. And when I get those moments where I start to feel uh, that tug inside, and I'm like, is this fear or not? I can come back to that spiritual compass. What are my commitments, right? Is this in keeping with my commitments? Well, some decisions are harder than others. Like someone listening, you might be in a relationship that you're not happy about, and you're thinking, do I leave this relationship? Like that's not a small decision. Or do I leave this job that I went to school for and my parents paid for it, and now, but I'm thinking I want to do something else. Again, those are big decisions, and that's again why we want to come back to this something like a spiritual compass and our commitments, which really takes knowing yourself well. Because what does success look like for you? Which comes back to where we started, that it's about the climb. It's not a, it's never about the summit actually from a success point of view, because the summit has actually no meaning without the climb. It's just a viewpoint that you could just drive up to on the mountain road, pull over, take some photos. But it means something only because of the climb. But what's guiding that climb, right? What's that compass? And I get people to do that. And then when they are having those moments of, is this my intuition? We can go back to, well, what's your compass? What are your commitments? You got to keep your commitments.
Right. But that reminded me, you put something in your pocket and you would keep it in there like $1 million or something. That kind of triggered a memory of that story. Can you share that?
Yeah, so this shows up in the book, but it's actually from my real life. So I don't know when it was, but I just had this idea like I'm going to create. I mean, I found a stone and I engraved, $1 million on it because it was just always this goal. Like I want to make $1 million in a year, and I'd never done that. So let me put this on a rock. So then I carried the rock with me every day. I would stick my hand in my pocket, and it's this idea of keep your goals in front of you. And so I did that. But a year later, 2 years later, I'm still no closer to making that. And so the stone actually became almost like mocking me at one point. So then I thought, just one day I was like, why are you carrying this rock? I mean, I would go through TSA at the checkpoint. I have to take it out and put it in the bin. Like it went with me
Right.
everywhere, every
Oh
single
my
day.
God.
And one day I said, why do you want this? Like, why is this in your pocket? Not like the goal, a financial goal is wrong, but why this? And then it just came to me because then I would feel like I was successful, which means I don't feel successful. And tied to that was feeling a sense of shame and embarrassment for that. And then I realized this rock in my pocket, this goal is so that I can erase my shame. I don't need $1 million to do that. I can do that on my own. And that was just like a wake up moment for me in terms of even when we create these goals, sometimes it's actually the ego just trying to feel like it's enough. And yeah, so that's the story of the stone. I still have it. I still have it in my
You
office.
do? Oh,
Yeah,
funny.
yeah.
I love it. Because there's things that I do, find a penny. It made me think of things when I was walking the dogs this morning, listening to that story. And, it's the little things I do. And I can see myself doing that too at the TSA thing with things that I've done. Um, but it's true because, now at this age, it's so cool to be free from that and understand like anything that you're using as you think is a tool to have this and remembering that you want that. It's not even, it's almost doing the reverse. It's like reminding you don't have it. It's a
Exactly.
reminder of the lack of.
Yeah. And when we work with people now, like when they come in our programs, what we do is we do ask them the question, like, what is it that you want? Like, what do you want in life? Which is a really difficult question for people to answer. Like, it's just people like, what do you mean, what do I want? Like, what am I allowed to want? Or like, no, just what do you want? And people have a hard time answering that, often because they don't know themselves well enough, or they're not honest enough because they don't feel worthy of what they would truly want. But we get them to think about what is it that you want? Like think through that dream life. And then we think, what's the version of you that just gets that life? What's the version of you that gets that life? And as they think about that, we talk about this elevated self, as they think about that person, then the goal changes. The goal is let's step into that person now. And what I say to them to explain it is I say, like, think back to maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, a time when you felt stuck or you were in a really tough situation. If you could time travel and go back in time now and go tell yourself what to do to get, like, could you help yourself, the earlier version of you? Of course you could, right? But what would be even better is if you could just go and take over the body. Like if you could go back 10 years and just step into your body and like, okay, we're going to think different. We're doing things different. We're having boundaries, like all these things. And you would get out of that situation so much faster because you think differently. You are different. And I said, well, in that same way, there's a future version of you that's elevated. Now imagine them coming back and stepping into who you are now. Well, who is that? And the more they focus on that, right, it's because the idea is that life comes to them. Just like your life right now is a product of who you are right now, right? It has come to you.
Right.
And there is something else you probably want. Well, it also goes to a certain version of you. And so that becomes the new goal. Step into that version. And as you do that and trust that over time, you think differently, you believe differently, you see different opportunities, Uh, and that's when doors really begin to open up for you.
Right. Okay, this came to me when you were explaining that. So when you think of how let's say in our lifetime, we've been raised, we've been programmed, we've been, all the education system, the government, the healthcare, all those things, right? And now all these people that are now working with you have been programmed to not even know who they are because they haven't been able to have the chance to be what I think when they're 0 to 7 and then onward in their teenage years to really know who they are. James, this lights me up so much because I feel so deeply with these kids at this age and it's because I didn't know. So I know that's where my soul's passion comes from is knowing when I see these kids because I'm with the teenagers. I work in schools down in San Diego and I see these kids and I want them to keep their light shining so bright because I know that once they get to come to you and they're in a corporation and you ask them what they want, who they are, they don't even know because they've never been able to have that time to deep dive into their soul because there's nothing like that in life unless maybe they had a parent that was a spiritual teacher or a minister, someone that kind of got, opened their eyes to that. And I've met people along my path and my podcast journey where they were so lucky they had that one little person or soul that was in their pathway that opened their eyes early so they were able to know their soul's purpose or see that know what they want. But I just have that like I'm so passionate about seeing my little 16-year-old and my 19-year-old knowing that you can have anything. You can do anything. There's no boundaries. There's nothing. Whatever you want is calling you. It's for you. It's for your highest good, the biggest purpose. That is what it is. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic, by the way, what you're doing with your daughters. It's such a great message to get into kids. It's a little bit like the world is a little bit like it's death by a thousand cuts, right? That we get disconnected from who we really are. And it's just this process of social conditioning, right? Especially you get into middle school and high school, it's like, well, don't do that and don't do that. And then you get into the work world, like, don't talk to the boss that way, don't do this. And before you know it, you're following this path that's carved out. And there's pieces of you in that, of course, but then there's these huge chunks that is just not you. And then that's why we got to go on vacation to blow off steam and hang out with our friends. And now I could just be who I am. Well, here's the thing: you can be who you are, even in your work setting. And this is part of a leadership lesson as well. Is that the best leaders are the ones who can settle into their natural style, right? So that the coaching leaders can be coaching leaders, the drivers can be drivers. It's okay, there's just different styles, but you don't have to be something else. So this idea of having to navigate, because it all comes back down to a few core fears that we're trying to avoid, right? Of getting rejected and abandoned, feeling like we have nothing of value to add to the world, right? They're all tied to this. So when we start to make all these course corrections to just stay away from those danger zones, then yeah, what are we left with? We're left with a whole bunch of people that are sort of living the same cookie cutter life. And, I can relate with that. But it's a safe thing to be in the cookie cutter shape. A little bit
Right.
like, the movie The Matrix, right? So um, there's so many parallels for that. But The Matrix, remember the guy, like it was one thing for them to wake up out of the matrix, right? Take Neo and that's that process all of us have to go through. Like we realize, oh, wait a minute, is this actually my life? But if you remember in the movie, there was the guy who in a sense stabbed everyone in the back and he just wanted to go back in the matrix. Like it was just easier. It's just easier. Like throw
Right.
me back in, program me, give me a good life. And a lot of people, that's their life. They don't have bad lives. Like they have a good life, but it's missing what you could become. It's missing what you're supposed to become for the sake of comfort, predictability, routine. And again, it's sort of like the saying, the devil we know is less scary than the devil that we don't. So it just keeps us in this mold.
Right. Let's go to the five to your book, The Call to Climb. The five stages. Is that you call them stages?
Yeah, I can't remember if I called them stages or how I worded it, just sections of the book for sure.
Yes, the sections of the book.
Yeah.
The summons is the first one.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea that when there's that need for that conversation with the soul, right? When you have those moments, whether you're driving in traffic alone or maybe you're sitting there on Sunday night contemplating going into work and not feeling good about it, or just those quiet moments when all of a sudden you reflect and you think, wait a minute, something's off. And we may not even know what it is, but something's off. And it's not just like one day, like, oh, I ate something bad, that's why something's off. No, like week after week after week after week, something's off, but we don't know what. And that's the beginning of the summons of the soul, where it's trying to get our attention to have that conversation.
Right. I love that. And then the next one's honor your path.
Yeah, honor your path is figuring out that, oh, there is something for me to do here. And that is to step into my purpose, which is to bring that most authentic and honest version of me to this world. And that's hard. Like it's not easy to do. It takes immense courage because we have all these, like we've said, we have all these programs. And I like how James Hollis put it, where he talked about like we think we're in charge of our life, but there's actually a shadow government that's sitting behind, kind of pulling the levers. And when we do something that they don't like, they impose heavy sanctions on us, right? Sanctions of anxiety and fear to kind of get us back in line. And so the only way out of that is to seize your life back and live it with intention. And that's where you come back to your spiritual compass. What is it that I want? How do I want to live my life? Then every time I'm pulled off of that, I'm going to come back to it. So that's the idea of honoring your path, is just to find out what does light your soul up. And then, all right, then let's start doing that and let's honor that.
Right. Okay. The third one, slaying your dragons.
Yeah. So as you start to do that, right, as you start to take back the reins of your life, then you're going to run into resistance in the form of fear and anxiety. And so in the book, I talk about these three different dragons that not only breathe fire, but they breathe shame, they breathe fear, right? This fear of being unloved and rejected, this fear that I'm not strong and capable enough to actually live my life, and that I have nothing of value to offer this world, right? So those are some of our deepest fears. But all of this comes back to how we view ourselves, like our identity. And if you think about it, like our identity is a little bit like those mosaics. Have you ever seen those mosaics where it's like a photo of someone's face, but then you zoom in and it's made up of 1,000 photos
Right.
of them and different things? Our identity is like that. It's just all these pictures, which are in a sense stories that we tell ourselves, or kind of identifiers or tags. So, for example, even when you asked me to introduce myself, I said, "Oh, I grew up on a small cattle ranch. I only redhead in my town." Like those are all true. Those would be little photos in my mosaic. But what's more important is, but what does that mean?
Right.
Because the meaning I give those. So, someone might say, my father was an alcoholic, which is why I don't drink, or which is why I work hard, or they might say the opposite, which is why, I drink, or why I'm so insecure. So all of us, we have these stories that we attach to these moments, but in a sense we can flip the picture tile from like black and white to color. Like I'm an introvert, which is why I hate networking events. Or I'm an introvert, which makes me so good at one-on-one deep conversations. Well, which view of that is going to make me more empowered when I go walk into a room of people I don't know? But that's the thing. I get to choose what I'm going to believe about myself
Right.
and also about the world. But all that ties back to the big enemy there is these dragons, these fears that we have.
Right. Yeah, I love that. You think of I always, when I hear people tell their stories, I'm not very I don't want to say compassionate, and I don't want to throw things under the rug. But when I hear them repeating it and they just keep feeding it, it's like you're going to keep feeding those dragons. Right? Like, come on, let's move on. Let's change our story. It can be whatever you want it to be. But you keep living in that story and you keep talking about it. And just like you were saying, pretty much, I mean, really, this whole thing is about let's change the story and change your life and realize that all those stories are just things that you keep talking about and they're not even true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They're
And
your
you have the power.
perspective, right? They're the things that you can tell. It's like you have I have two sisters. We can all tell a story of our childhood. We had the same childhood, but I can tell you what my version is, and we lived in the same bedroom, but hers is completely different. But we all have these lessons to learn. But once you get to realize that those stories that you're saying about why you're a certain way, you've been told that your whole life. So that's what you believe. And that's why in this time of my life is why I see that so clearly and why as a mom, and we're so quick in this house, James, the minute someone says something, any kind of like they know, and it's like, cancel that, cancel it, mom.
Great.
I don't mean it. Like, don't let that go out of into the universe. But it's like those simple little things, James, like if you only knew the power of that to what it does for your like vibration, what attracts to you in your life, if you're going to keep telling that story and like, what do you keep attracting? Oh, the same thing. Okay, well, maybe there's a reason. Maybe we need to change the story, right?
Exactly. And the stories are either about ourselves or about how the world works, right? And so
Yes.
like my mother used to say, bad things happen in threes. And so of course after two bad things, we're like, we're just waiting for the
Waiting,
third one.
waiting.
Like, where is it? And we have a guy that's going through the program right now on the Call to Climb. And we did this 1 week on worldviews, like how do you view the world? And he showed up at one of the calls and he said, "Well, I'm just really negative about the world right now. Like everything's going on, and I'm just I feel like people are selfish and everyone's." And so we talked about that. Like there are a lot of people that are like that for sure, but like is everyone like that? And what's a better worldview that we could step into? And the group gave him some ideas, but what they ended up settling on was the world is full of great people, which is true. The world is full of great people. Well, anyways, that was a week ago, and he just posted online in the wins section. He just said, "I got to say, this has absolutely changed so
Oh,
many things for me that I didn't even realize." He said, "I'm less negative. I'm starting to see more good in the world." Just because he changed the lens, or that was all. Like the world is full of good people, and that's
right.
true.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We're always talking because Uncover Your Magic. I started this program at the beginning of this for groups of children, and they'd have to share a magic moment every day. And so then they have to text it to me. That was part of their assignment or, thing. So it got to be, I said, it doesn't just if you saw a hummingbird, a rainbow, you got to go to your favorite place to eat. It doesn't have to be, there's no parameters. Like it's all your magic, whatever magic is to you. And so has evolved and I'm listening. And now it's like, once you find you wake up in the morning and it's a game now that every magic moment, you're just searching for that magic moment. So if people could see their life, like he started to go, oh, wow, this is amazing. Like, I can't wait to leave the house and see my next magic moment and finding it. And you'll see it because you've had that, I mean, reticular activating system. If you have your intention set and all of a sudden everything, you look for the white car and there's a million of them, right? Like, but it's like understanding the power of your thoughts and where your intention is and what that will pull into you and to know that every moment is magic. Just to be in this body on this planet right now is magic. And that we signed
Absolutely.
up for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I get so excited. So 4 is energy. I'm still on that.
Yeah.
We're almost done, but
The beautiful state. Yeah. So the idea of the beautiful state is that you make the weather, right? So instead of waking up every day and like check the forecast, unless you live in San Diego where it's just beautiful every day, but for the rest of us that have like turbulent weather, we check and then we're gonna have some kind of emotion based on what's the weather. But the idea there is no, you create the weather. So, and that is this idea of our internal state. So, I first learned this from a guy named Michael Bullock, and it was this idea of that there's only two states. There's a beautiful state and a suffering state, or what I call a turbulent state. There's no third state. And so I view it more like let's imagine a mountain for a moment. There's this there's this beautiful thing that happens if you're climbing and the weather's not great, but then all of a sudden you break through the clouds and you all of a sudden you're above the clouds, but you're still on Earth. It's just really cool. I mean, when you take off in a plane, you get a similar
Hmm.
feeling like that, right? You climb above the weather. Well, every day we have that opportunity as we get up to think, well, what's a beautiful state for me, right? Like a beautiful state for me is going to be states like peace, joy for me, gratefulness, gratitude, a sense of awe. So there's a few things that I've defined for me. That's my beautiful state. Well, what's my turbulent state? Being frustrated, I'm angry, I'm worried, I feel anxious about something, I feel like a loser about something, I feel insecure. Like I can just go through the whole list. And so I even have on just a drawing where I have these emotions that I define as beautiful state for me, and then the turbulent state below. And in the morning, I'll have this check-in moment where I'm like, where am I? Above the clouds or below? And often there's like I'm below the clouds on something, right? Like I'm frustrated. I'm already frustrated. It's like 6:30 a.m. I'm already frustrated. Okay, let me deal with that because I choose the weather. Like I'm gonna create the weather, and that's
Right,
gonna dictate so much about my climb today. And
right,
so, yeah, sometimes you got to process something or deal with something, but then it's getting your mind back on the things that produce the beautiful state. So like what you've done, Ashley, with magical moments, that's so great because that produces a sense of gratitude in people. That creates
right.
happiness. It's intention, right?
Right. You know, what comes to me when you're saying that, you're either coming from love or fear. That's it. That's it, basically what you were saying. So in my
Mhm.
life, I've always said, you know, if someone's saying something, I'm like, well, are you coming from love or fear? Because you can't come from, there's nothing else to come from,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's such a great way to simplify to somebody when they are going through something and they do have these thoughts that are coming from fear or the turbulence in the weather, you know, that whole thing that you just said, to have that and recognize that when you get there and see what triggers you to do that. So the next time you get into that place, you work more toward, okay, how can I come from love? It's for me. This is amazing. I wonder what it's teaching me. You know, looking at all the gratitude of that and how did I get that in my life? And look at what I've learned now. I don't even have that trigger anymore, right?
And it opens up parts of you where all that creativity lies. Like often when we're in a negative state, it's because we're trying to solve some problem. But the problem is best solved in the state of what you described, right? A state of love, state of abundance. And that's why, you know, we just, I have to remind myself, I control the weather. And so if I get up and it's 10:30 and it's stormy because I'm whatever, angry about something, hey, let me change the weather. Like I don't have to wait for it to change. I can change it.
Right. You know, I always taught the girls growing up, be the thermostat, like set the temperature. And when you know, always did gratitude and all the intentions in the morning, give compliments. And that was all for me, teaching them being intentionable, whatever it is, to be the thermostat, you know, set the temperature in the room when you get to school. You're not at 60 or 50 with these kids that come to school and haven't done any of that. It takes a lot longer to climb if we're talking about climbing, to get to 100. So let's be intentional every morning to be the thermostat and set that temperature. And everyone's going to say, what did you do to be this way? Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, number 5. How do you keep climbing?
Yeah. The idea there is that, look, you need a mountain to climb. Everyone needs a mountain to climb. If like, first of all, and part of that is about like doing hard things. Like there should just always be something that you're about to tackle that's difficult because that's where we grow. Um, but how do we keep climbing? Again, it's going to come back to, you know, when we think about honoring our path, we think about being, um, honoring our soul, that believing that we are here for something special. But then taking all these breadcrumbs from our life and going all in on something. This doesn't mean you have to quit your job and take up a new job, but it's just that whatever it is that you're climbing, to find joy in that, right? It's not like what you have to do, but what you get to do. Like every moment can be turned into something that is amazing. So part of that is just that attitude, right? Like, how do I keep going? Well, then let me not view this as something so painful, and let me lean into this as something beautiful. But the other idea there is understanding that so much of keeping climbing is just reframing pain, because that's when we want to quit, some kind of pain. Either physical, like in an actual real mountain, where like I'm so tired I got to stop, but often it's emotional pain, like I'm scared to fail, I'm discouraged because I'm not making progress or whatever it might be. And so when you can when you can ask yourself the question when you're wanting to quit something and just go, well, what is it actually that I'm avoiding? Like, if I quit, what would that be in service to? Like, how would that help me? And then you're able to find out, like, yeah, is this just a physical thing and I'm just tired, I actually need some rest, and leave this for a bit and I'll come back to it? Or is this revealing something deeper for me, that I'm scared to fail? I'm scared if I
Right.
really give my heart and I fail, what will that mean for me? Okay, well, we can work on that now. We don't have to wait till we succeed or fail. But so much of to keep climbing has to do with understanding why there's resistance in the first place, what's creating the pain for us. And if we can deal with that there on the mountain, great. Then, okay, shorten your steps and keep going.
Right. Oh, this has been so fun. I've loved it. Can you add things? Because since I haven't read the book, like other little things in the book, teasers that people will get from that experience of reading The Call to the Climb, The
For
Call to
sure.
Climb.
Yeah. If you do happen to read this, there's, the whole journey is about this character named Riley, and they of course meet a guide named Santiago, and Santiago is taking them up this climb, but really it's the mountain that's just delivering these lessons. And one of the lessons that's up high on the mountain is they get snowed in, and there's just this blizzard and it just won't let up. They're just like being buried in snow. And Santiago finally says, the mountain is not letting us climb further, because you've got things that have burdened in your heart that you're not letting go of. And it has to do with people that you have not forgiven, and even yourself. And you've got to unpack that. And there's this whole section where the main character really wrestles through that, because how many of us have had to do that in our life, right? Like, forgive somebody who's wronged us. And it's just this titanic battle that goes on. And that came out of personal experience as well. But it was one of my favorite parts of the book, because it speaks to so many of these universal themes. And here we are, we drag all this weight in life with us. But when I was climbing in Bolivia, I remember the lead guide before summit day, he came to me and he said, "Hey, what's in your pack?" And he goes, "Can I see it?" And I'm like, okay, I'm in my mid 30s. It's not like I didn't know anything about the mountains. So my ego flared up a little bit, like, why are you going to look at my pack? But he's going through it. He pulls out the sunscreen. He's like, "Why do you have this?" I'm like, "Well, it's sunscreen." I'm like, a redhead. And he's like, "No, I mean, like, why do you have this whole bottle? Like, when you only need this much?" And, he showed me how he had it in a little film canister. And just piece by piece in my pack, he'd be like, why are you carrying all of this? And it was so much like, you have to lighten the load if you want to reach the higher elevations. And that's true in life as well. And I'll say this, that I was interviewing a guy for a podcast, and he had this person that had a big grudge against him. But then this person got cancer and was dying. And so phoned him up and he just said, "Hey, I just want to make things right between us, because I want to be able to die in peace." And the guy said to me, everybody wants to die in peace, but shouldn't we want to live in peace? It's the same formula, right? Just to unburden ourselves and let this stuff go.
Right. I love it. Tell everybody how to find you, how to buy your book. and the things that you're doing now, now that the book was out in August, right?
Yeah, the book just came out in August. The best way, I guess, to find me and find the book is go to the website iwillclimb.com, iwillclimb.com, and you can find the book there, and you can find links to me and the other projects that I'm doing.
Okay. I loved it. Thank you, James.
Thanks, Ashley.